Willkommen! My name is Sean Huggins. I'm an American living in Germany, and on this channel, I'm looking to learn all about life in Germany and Europe in general through watching silly videos and stuff on the internet with you guys. So, if you enjoy, consider subscribing. We got new videos every single day. And today's comment of the day comes from John Hazelwood, 58. And they say, is this a re-upload? Think I saw this video reaction before. Anyways, great. Well, John, I have news for you. None of my videos, to my knowledge, have been re-uploads so far. But I'm closing in on 200 videos coming up here soon, and I'm not gonna lie, it's starting to get hard to keep track of all the different videos that I've watched, and it is a big fear of mine that I will re-react to a video that I already reacted to and unintentionally re-upload it. It's something that I think about all the time, and I'm sure that one day it's going to happen. The more I keep doing this, the more videos I put out, it's just going to be harder and harder to keep track of all of it because I already don't remember every single video that I've watched, and I've only been doing this a couple of months. All that to say, so far, I'm pretty sure I don't have any re-uploads, I don't have any re-reactions, anything like that. But hey, one day, who knows? At any rate, though, let's get into today's reaction. So today we have Americans are taking over Europe by Into Europe. If Americans are in fact taking over Europe, I have yet to notice it here in Germany. I am the only American that I know in about 1,000-kilometer square radius. At least it seems that way. But if I'm in a big city, then I would say definitely a lot of Americans. Though I'm not sure why. I came to Germany for a pretty unique situation, I would say. I met my German fiance in America and her visa ran out basically, and we moved back here together, partially because her visa ran out, but also like we both wanted to travel the world, and living in Germany is a good location to do that from. At any rate though, let's see why other Americans are taking over Europe apparently. I don't understand why, but let's see. Los geht's!
Whoa. If you walk in the streets of Valencia, you'll pick up English, but not just any English. American English.
Speak the right way, the American way.
Valencia is one of the most international cities in the whole of Spain. It's a tourism hotspot, it has multiple universities and English language schools. And it's becoming one of the favorite destinations for Americans in both Spain and in Europe. And I'm here to investigate a topic that you might have seen on YouTube before. There is an entire subgenre of YouTubers praising the European way of life and escaping the United States.
Okay.
I initially thought this might be just a media trend, since complaining about your country seems like a sure way to get those sweet clicks and views.
Definitely a very good way to get sweet clicks and views.
But when I took a look at the numbers and started talking to Americans who made the move,
they still have their homes in the US.
I learned that it's not just the vloggers that are coming here. Instead, it's the story of what seems like a growing trickle of Americans emigrating to Europe.
Okay.
New visas, online work, and an increasingly English-speaking Europe have lowered the threshold to come, while the United States is becoming a more unhospitable country.
On the latest outbreak of gun violence,
the trafficking of fentanyl and other synthetic opioids.
The Supreme Court ruled to end Roe v. Wade.
While the United States has prided itself on the promise of the American dream, and for many remains a land of opportunity, could it be that its neglect of social policy is coming back to bite it? And might Europe's bet on quality of life finally be paying economic dividends? Since
Let's
its
find
founding,
out, I suppose.
The United States has been a country of immigration, with more than 1 million people migrating to the country in 2022.
Okay.
But the United States is also becoming a country of emigration. Before I go out into the city, I have a couple of graphs to show you to give you an idea of how significant this transformation is. Americans have historically not been the globe-trotting types. After all, the United States has everything you could wish for. Cities.
America has everything you could wish for, I suppose, but also it is very difficult to travel outside of America. It's very expensive. The travel times to get to different places around the world are a lot farther than a lot of other places in the world to travel from, which makes the options a lot more limited in what the average American can afford to do time-wise and money-wise.
With varying climates, diverse geography, and jobs and opportunity aplenty.
Yeah.
In fact, in 1999, The Economist wrote that educated Americans were the least likely people to leave their country. But over the past 2 decades, the number of passports issued by the United States has boomed, particularly after the 2007 financial crisis and what I can only assume is the aftermath of the 2016 US presidential elections, which was won by Donald Trump. Today, some 40% of Americans have a passport, and some have used it to cross the Atlantic to make their way to Europe. The data I found on American migration is imperfect. It turns out it's quite hard to get a precise number. I thought of looking at the number of registered voters, granted visas, or permanent residents. For the latter, it shows a steady increase in Americans having permanent residency in Europe, with their favorite destinations being the south of the continent.
Okay, so the amount of Americans moving to Europe is gradually increasing, though it doesn't look that substantial at all, though, so I'm not sure about Americans taking over Europe. That seems a bit dramatic, but this is just the first little graph we got here, so let's continue.
Residency in Europe, with their favorite destinations being the south of the continent, particularly Spain, Italy, and Portugal. If you look at other data, there would apparently be 200,000 Americans living in France alone, versus about 40,000 if you look at the number of permanent residents. But I have a hunch that the number of Americans is greater than that for the whole of Europe, especially because of the time it takes to get more permanent status. Some Americans basically move between European countries every 90 days while they wait for the slow wheels of Europe's bureaucracies to do their work. Yet throughout all these different metrics...
Sounds expensive. I would love to be able to do that, though.
One thing is clear. The number of American expats migrating to Europe is increasing. And there are multiple, often personal stories for that. But they boil down to Europe simply being a better place to live. Now, I could go through all the reasons and show you graphs for why that is, like social mobility, cheaper education, access to healthcare, maternity leave, or work-life balance. I could also show you maps of walkable cities. Yeah, I know that it's kind of a Euroflex. Others come to leverage this, the American dollar, through geo-arbitrage.
There's something called geo-arbitrage, which basically means you can take what you earn in one place and move to another place that's cheaper and leverage it.
Geo-arbitrage? That's a stupid name. Why does everything have to have a name? Making money and moving to a cheaper place to live? Why does that have to have a name called geo-arbitrage? It's so stupid. Yeah, I mean, I guess in this person's case, they're talking about remote workers who can work out of America technically, but they're 100% remote, so they can just live anywhere. So they're, I guess, moving to Europe to travel around while they work. Makes sense. I'm sure there's a lot more remote jobs nowadays than there were 5 years ago, let's say. So yeah, that definitely makes sense to me.
Since Americans earn more in absolute terms and the euro has fallen relative to the dollar, American incomes and savings can get more bang for their buck here. But based off of the people I've talked to here, there is one reason that stands out more than the rest.
Why?
Safety.
I was also worried that if I went to a grocery store, was I going to get shot?
We know 5 people in the Seattle area, they were shot in a parking lot.
Oh my God.
Well, this is a safe place to have kids.
Carnage in our nation's schools has become painfully repetitive.
Who would have thought that keeping themselves and their kids safe would be so high on people's list of priorities?
Wow, fascinating. I mean, yeah, statistically comparing America to Germany for crime rates, Germany is a lot safer. That being said, when you are actually in America and you're living in America, at least for me, it just depends where you are. If you go to a bad neighborhood, there's going to be higher crime rates. If you go to a not bad neighborhood, there are extremely low crime rates. Well, of course, in an ideal world, there's no crime. Everybody is safe. But at the same time, it's not so simple in America to say that America is not safe, because 99% of America is safe when you are actually living there or traveling there. It just is maybe not what the media wants to portray, because that doesn't get the clicks. It's not as exciting. That's not to say something shouldn't be done about the crime rate in America, but when you're actually there and you're living in that situation, it is really not as bad as people seem to portray it online. At least in my experience, you just have to be smart about where you go and who you hang out with.
And as it turns out, European countries are more than willing to oblige these American migrants. They're educated, seen as culturally compatible, and while there is definitely a pool of retirees coming to enjoy a golden retirement, according to the stats, most are young and potentially valuable contributors to Europe's aging societies and government deficits.
Okay, well, I'm definitely in this demographic, that's for sure.
In the south of Europe, Spain, Italy, Portugal, and Greece have all set up digital nomad visas with substantial tax concessions.
That's cool.
In the hope of attracting remote workers to increase their tax bases. It's perfect for remote working Americans doing geographic arbitrage. But it has caused some backlash.
Such a stupid geographic arbitrage. Why does it have to have a name in the first place? Just call it working remotely, dude. Oh my
Not
God.
just Americans, but also
So
Europeans like myself that have come to live here, raise prices on rent, as internationals are able to price out locals, like in Portugal, where housing prices have increased by 40%, which has been blamed on mostly Americans coming to the country. And
Americans come to Portugal and raise the prices of property by 40%? Come on now. Dude, properties all over the world are up 1,000% in the last 10 years. So silly.
it's been trial and error to find winning recipes for these countries. Portugal scrapped its golden visa, which allowed free access to the country for a $600,000 investment, after mostly American investors started hoarding real estate and drove up housing prices.
Dude, $600,000. So mostly American investors came to Portugal and bought a bunch of real estate. If you put a visa out there that says, pay us $600,000, and then you get a visa, what do you expect people to do? You expect the average Joe to come over and be like, I'm going to pay you $600,000 for a visa and then just go work at the local deli or something? No, it's going to be rich people looking to make money from that $600,000 investment, you silly gooses. What the frick?
But in the north of Europe, it's a different story. After all, it doesn't make a lot of sense to live there as a digital nomad since life is much more expensive and the weather is just terrible. Instead,
does Germany count as Northern Europe? I guess maybe Central Europe? I don't know. I guess
these countries seem to be attracting a different cohort of Americans who are integrating much more into local economic life. In Amsterdam, one of continental Europe's more cosmopolitan cities, it's actually hard to find Dutch-speaking waiters. Settling down for Americans is much easier there, where English fluency is greater and where there are actually English-speaking jobs.
Let's see here. Oh, there's Germany. Germany is listed as Northern Europe. Interesting.
Owing to the export and trade-oriented economies of the North and the American investment in those countries. Recently, this has even created problems for top-tier jobs at the EU when Americans apply. And while the benefits of those migrants are clear, as with other immigrants, there's one important question. Will they integrate locally? After all, in Spain, like much of Southern Europe, there's little hope for additional American workers to integrate locally into the economy.
Obviously, you could work for a Spanish company, there's that back door, but that's extremely difficult because even Spaniards can't work for Spanish companies.
So the people
Yeah, not to mention, if you have the money to relocate to a foreign country and you're already working 100% remotely, it's probably at a high in-demand job, which means you're probably going to have a higher pay grade with an American company, American salary, than you would, say, working for a Spanish company in this example.
coming here remain in a parallel, internationally focused economy, whereas in the north of the continent, where the economy and society is much more English-speaking, there is much more hope for Americans to fit in. Especially since on the cultural side, Americans are notoriously bad at other languages, and may, like many expats in new countries, judge that their English is enough to get around. But there's something I wanted to know. Is this American migration a potential silver bullet to some of Europe's biggest problems, like its place in the global competition for talent and for its aging population? Well, when it comes to talent, there are these lofty articles about the death of Silicon Valley and how engineers may relocate to Europe, as well as new startup laws in Spain or France, where European countries hope to attract global and American talent to bring much needed dynamism to their economies. But so far, American founders haven't flocked to Europe. It's more the disillusioned American upper middle class that is coming to the continent. European bureaucracy and taxes means that the United States are still the kings of business. But where it could also have an impact is on the emigration of Europeans to the United States. There are fewer Europeans applying for permanent residence. However, since it's mostly young people that immigrate, this may also be a result of an aging Europe. There are just fewer people in the age group to emigrate to the United States. So once again, this is a bit inconclusive. But what remains true out of all of this is that 40% of America's 230 million people are entitled to European citizenship through ancestry. Some will likely choose to vote with their feet. That's a pool of educated, culturally compatible workers that European countries could potentially tap into. But as it happens, it also is likely to reinforce the cultural and family bonds between both sides of the Atlantic. And it's something that could have deep implications on the languages spoken in Europe, and particularly how dominant English would become. While the volumes are relatively small, this first wave of American immigrants is a sign of what could potentially come. Well, right now, Europe seems to be a refuge for Americans looking for a better life rather than economic opportunity, and there are economic benefits to reap. If European countries can get their act together and offer a more friendly business environment, then it's possible that it's not just the middle class that would jump ship. But what do you think? Is offering good quality of life a suitable strategy? And can countries like Spain offer enticing offers to attract wealthy, educated, and entrepreneurial Americans? Let me know what you think in the comments down below.
Whoa, wow. That was an interesting video, but I'm thinking about a few things here. Firstly, the title of Americans are taking over Europe. I think that is definitely more than just a bit dramatic. From all of the statistics that this guy showed in the video, there is an increase in Americans moving to Europe, but it's not a dramatic increase by any means. So I don't think it would be fair to say that Americans are taking over Europe. That seems like a bit of an exaggeration, to put it nicely. I think that Europe in general is a great place to live in the world, but I would say the small increase over time of Americans moving to Europe is probably mostly due to the ease with which you can now do things internationally. I talked about this in a bunch of other videos, but more Europeans are speaking English than probably ever before, certainly in Germany, which for an American moving to Europe is obviously very beneficial to say the least. Not only that, but remote work is exceedingly more popular now than it has been in the last 5, 10, let alone 20 years. Plus technology in general, digitizing everything from your banking to your communication, whether that's through WhatsApp, social media, being able to use Google Translate, Skype, FaceTime. There are all these things that make traveling so much easier than the last 10, 20 years. And while I think that the lifestyle in general of Europe is a lot better for a lot of people, I still think the main reason is because it's so much easier nowadays and there's so much less friction nowadays to be able to even do these types of things compared to, like I said, in the past. Because in reality, that guy showed us the statistics. It's not like a huge increase in Americans moving to Europe, but just a little bit of an increase. I'd be more curious to see in the next 10 years what the landscape looks like then, and then be able to say, okay, there's a lot of Americans moving to Europe, or maybe it was just a little uptick, but in general, it's roughly the same. Who knows? Only time will tell. But I leave it up to you guys. What do you guys think? I've posed this question before on the channel, but do you think that a lot of Americans are moving to Europe? Does it seem like you're coming into contact a lot more with Americans where you guys are living? I don't know. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments. At any rate, though, that's all the time that I have for today. If you enjoyed, consider subscribing. We got new videos every single day. Check the links in the description for all of my other social media, including my vlog channel. Thank you guys so much for being here, and as always, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Peace.